what the trajectory and history of women and women voting within that time, how that is. So that's an overview of what we're doing. But I wanted to take a moment just before we dive right into everything to take time to introduce everybody. So, right next to me on the couch, we have Laura Munoz. And then we also have Sienna Nelson,
Hello.
Tammy Ray Scott, Edith Butler, Paloma Tejeda, and Andrea Stuckey. And together we are working on this project about Dancing with the Ballot. We're looking at various forms that it will be delivered to the public. One thing we're thinking about, and we've talked about a lot, is the idea of it being. Pardon, what? What's up? Oh, sorry, someone's yelling at me. Ah! I'm a little knee jerk from being the youngest of seven. So, one of the, what was I saying? Dancing with the Ballot. I've introduced everyone. Two formats, perhaps. We're looking at maybe having what we're calling a sonic series that would run on Humboldt Hot Air, and we could have it places where it would be an audio file. And we're also looking at doing it digitally. We were exploring the possibility of an in-person, but I think we will want to get it out before that happens, before November. So you have to stay tuned with us and sign up on our emails to on the Playhouse email to figure out to learn about where it's going to be. So it'll be an exciting project nonetheless. So like I said, one of the things that was really interesting to me when spearheading the project was not only how the white woman got the vote, but what the vote meant for Indigenous women, women of color, Asian women, and what that meant. And so Tammy brought a book up to us all that we took a chance to. We listened to the audio and read some of the book. Tammy, maybe you want to talk a little bit about what we saw in that, and we also watched a video production of it. So maybe you want to talk just a second about that we watched. About I'm blanking on the name totally. I know the word fight.
Finish the Fight.
Yes, thank you. Finish the Fight. I'm sorry. So maybe just give a little overview of that project.
Okay, I wasn't prepared to answer that question.
No, I
but
know.
from what I remember,
Yeah.
anybody that has the time to check it out, and Jackie, maybe you can put or later I can put the link in the chat box here.
Chat.
But it was a culmination, I think, of a 2 or 3 year project that the New York Times did, focusing on women of color and the vote. And it was just spectacular, very well done, and learning about women and their lives and how they were inspired by that. And one thing I do have, I'm sorry, it's been a while since I watched it, but it's fabulous. And there's also a book about it. And there's this one historian called Sally Roche Wagner, who said a lot of her work centers on the influences of and correct me if I'm wrong, the Haudenosaunee or Iroquois women on the movement. And these are Indigenous women who for 1,000 years had political voice in their sovereign nations and continue to. The Iroquois clan mothers decide the chiefs to represent their clan. They advise them and have the responsibility to remove them if they don't live up to their responsibilities. One absolute rule is that a chief can't have abused a woman or child. And that sounds pretty good as a test of suitability for office. The early suffragists knew the Indigenous women had authority over their lives in their nations, and that US women didn't have rights to their bodies, their possessions, and their children, safety and political voice. Having this as a model showed some suffragists that equality was possible.
Yeah. So we'll put that up. We'll try and find that and put that in the chat, as well as we'll have it available afterwards, sort of through the Playhouse website and through our social medias. it really sort of it pushed us out the gate a little bit, looking at this research of these women and looking at the role of women in all women in securing the vote, and then what that in turn meant for women of color as we went along, saying that some Native women did not actually get the vote until 1962. 1962. So that's what we're investigating in the play as well. So I wanted to take some time today just to talk about our process and what we're looking for and what we're doing in this process, and also give people a chance to ask us questions. And we're looking for family stories because we are focusing on Humboldt County. So we're looking specifically at Humboldt County women between the pandemics. And so if you have family stories or anything, we invite you to drop your email in the chat as we go along. Anything comes to you, and Edie Butler, our veritable historian, will then take all that information and she'll reach out to you and gather all those stories. So let's just dive right in because it's 12:07, people. We've been here for 7 minutes. And what I wanted to do was get Andrea Stuckey. She is working at the Arcata Playhouse. She's working on this show, Dancing with the Ballot. Her company, Yaws, Youth Arts Will Succeed, is also a company in residence. And she's also doing community outreach to the Black community to uplift Black artists in our community. So, Andrea, we're going to talk a little bit about just some of the work that you're doing with Dancing with the Ballot.
Okay, hi everybody. It's such an honor to be in this space with you all, and I really have been enjoying this opportunity to just connect with the Playhouse and the Black community and collaborate in that way. It's wonderful. And necessary, especially in a rural area. So on that note, yeah, so alongside this amazing cast and crew of what's becoming Dance with the Ballot, I will be co-creating a performance piece, potentially also an auditory piece that gives us an inside peek of what the lives of Black women specifically were during the suffrage movement in Humboldt. So dancing between what the suffrage meant for us as Black women in the past and what it is today. So we all know that women of all shades were oppressed, but the added realities of racism makes navigating bureaucratic settings especially hard for Black women. And although we have made significant progress for the fight for women's suffrage, there are still a lot of unfortunate similarities. So my hope is that by taking an in-depth look at Humboldt's Black history, for example, the Amity Club, founded by Mary Watkins, which Jackie did do a piece on already, we will be able to bring real life local stories to the forefront, which is really exciting to me. So in doing so, I hope to honor this area's rich Black history that does exist, that a lot of people don't know about, which is also my history as a proud second generation born Black community member here. So I do hope that the outcome of this performance piece inspires continued acknowledgement and empowerment for the Black women of Humboldt and women of every background. So that is my portion to Dancing with the Ballot. Yeah, back to you, Jackie.
Great. Thanks, Andrea. So now I'm going to turn it over to Laura and Paloma to speak a little bit about your role within Dancing with the Ballot. So I'm going to put my mask on, and Laura will take her mask off. Wait, I have my mask on upside down.
Muffled, not muted.
And you could still, if you want to stay
okay,
over there, the camera will be with you.
Oh my goodness.
I know, it'll stay
so
with you.
high-tech.
We're so high tech.
All right.
Yeah.
Hi, so yeah, my compañera Paloma and I, we are researching the Latinx and Hispanic community. We know that there's not a whole lot of historical data, but the little bit that there is, we'll incorporate it. And we are looking also at present day community members from the Latinx and Hispanic community. There is another project that I'm involved with that intersects with this, and the name of this organization that we're starting in its baby steps called CUNA, which in Spanish means cradle, and it stands for Comunidad Unida del Norte de Arcata. So that's the United Community of North Arcata, and that is Valley West. So for that project, we are starting to organize to ameliorate and to through health and culture in the Valley West community as part of Arcata. And what we're going to do is we're going to empathy interviews with the residents of that area. And I would like for those interviews to also reflect their take and their experiences with the ballot. So this dancing with the ballot, who can vote, who cannot vote, if you can vote, what does that mean? And just ready to listen to everybody's experience on that. Maybe I can say this now, maybe it'll come back later. Also to acknowledge that, you know, all these things is that so via words, but what is underneath the words? What are the gestures on those words, so that we can translate these interviews, everything that is orally given or we read about them. How do we adapt that to the theater? So how do we bring those words and those experiences to life? We won't be literally translating, just, oh, this is what this person said, so I'll be talking about that. But how these experiences come alive on stage. Paloma, if you'd like to add something, that would be great. Or I know that you have a poem for perhaps later.
Yeah, that's later on.
But if you want to add something to what I just said.
I think the only thing I would want to add is that because there is so little written down about the Latinx history here, specifically in Arcata, we're going to be working kind of backwards in time. So we're focusing on the people now and hoping that they will lead us to the people in the past that were here in Arcata. And yeah.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you. One of the things that we've done in the past is, if you've seen any of our shows, we've done Women of the Northwest, where we explore the history of women, A Woman's Place is in Her Home, where we explored homelessness, the Logging Project, Echoes of War. And so some of our pieces have been rooted in history. And so we're going to use some of those same techniques in this project to build, like Laura was saying, a more dynamic theater presentation. So we're not getting into just the talking heads that we had talked about. What I want to do is I want to move forward into content, how we're arriving at some of our content. And so, Tammy, I'm going to get you to talk a little bit about, excuse me, voting and the genesis of the word voting and what it, where it comes from and what it means. I like putting you on the spot, Tammy, because you always rise to the challenge, and I like that.
Okay, let me get to that. Part. I'm getting to that part. Vote. And from the Latin votum, a vow, a wish, a promise to God, a solemn pledge, a dedication, to promise or to dedicate, is the dictionary etymology of the word vote.
That's great.
Isn't that great?
It is great. It is so great just talking about the solemnity and the responsibility of voting that sometimes I think has been lost in the quest for the ballot by some people. And I think that we're seeing the resurgence of the power of the vote. And so and what it actually, like, just with looking at with voter turnout for the last election, what that was, how the voter turnout skyrocketed, and how we move forward through voting. So I wanted to play a clip that Tammy, because she's an awesome researcher, gave us. And it's from NPR, and it's about a woman who voted in the 1918 pandemic, and talking to her granddaughter, and it's like I said, it's from NPR. I feel like I'm saying a lot, and I
It's
apologize for that.
StoryCorps.
StoryCorps. It's from StoryCorps. So, Shoshana, when you're ready for that, I will mute and do my video.
And there are 2 photos to show with that too. Does that sound good to share when they happen? No
That
problem.
sounds great.
Okay, sorry, 1 second. I was having a little thing I was figuring out. Okay. Not yet, no. It will be in just 1 second, please.
Thanks for all you're doing, Shoshana, for leaping and saying yes.
Hey, it's Friday, which means it's time again for StoryCorps. More than a century ago, Blanche Reeves was living in rural Iowa when she got sick during the 1918 flu pandemic. She still managed to cast her vote in the 1920 presidential election. Decades later, her daughter Helen Merrill, who's 91, recalled her mother's determination and talked about it with her granddaughter Elizabeth Hartley.
When Mom became so very ill, the doctor came to their farm home. It was late afternoon, and he went into the bedroom. Mom was apparently in a coma because she could hear everything said, but she couldn't respond or move or anything. And she remembered hearing Dad ask the doctor about his wife, and he said, well, she won't live till morning. So he said, I'm going to fill out the death certificate and leave it on the table, but I'm not going to sign it, and I'm not going to put in the time of death. And Mom remembered him fainting over the foot of the bed. And when the doctor came back the next day and saw that she was alive, he couldn't believe it. So fast forward, November 1920 is coming, and Mom intended to vote, but she had not really fully recovered from the flu of 1918. So that morning, Dad came into the bedroom and told her he was going to go vote. And she said, well, I'm going with you. And he said, you can't go vote. You're sick. And she raised up in bed. She said, I'm going to go vote. So Dad went out and hitched up the team of horses, and he put some fresh straw on the bottom of the wagon. And he went in and wrapped Mom all up and still in her nightgown and carried her out the wagon, covered her up, and drove to a country school. He carried her in, she voted, put her back in the wagon, took her home, and she went back to bed. She had this determined nature. If something was right, hell or high water wasn't going to stop her from doing it. So to not vote to me would just be, I think she would come back and haunt me in some way.
Do you remember the first time that you went to vote?
Yes, it was 1948. I had just graduated from high school, and I was 18. And in all the years I've been eligible to vote, I've only missed one time. That was long ago. I missed a school board election.
Wow.
I received my absentee ballot today, and I'm going to take it down, drop it in the box at the courthouse. And to me, it's almost a sacred thing. Going to the polls, no matter how you feel, is the one way in our country where every person is equal. My vote counts as much as someone who's a multi-billionaire, who is a rock star or a movie star. My vote at the polls means just as much. And that's really important to me.
91-year-old Helen Merrill and Elizabeth Hartley remembering their family's matriarch, Blanche Lois Folks Reeves. Their conversation will be archived at the Library of Congress.
I think that that's such an amazing statement that, you know, my vote counts as much as anyone else's. And it's not always true that sort of with voter suppression and everything that we have going on right now, there is not an equality in vote. Did you want to say something, Andrea? Did I just see you undo your sound? That I wanted to listen to this next little clip. Oh, sorry. Did you want to? I wanted to listen to this next clip from Stacey Abrams on the Mother Jones podcast. And it's just a quick 2-minute clip, but I recommend that everyone goes and listens to it. Oh my gosh, my phone declined. That everyone goes and listens to the podcast, because it is quite an amazing podcast. And we'll slap that in the chat as well, that podcast. So we're going to listen to that podcast right now, and Shoshana, you can take it away again.
Sorry, just 1 second.
Sorry. So just as we look forward to talking about the dancing with the ballot and looking from the role of women, it's almost looking within Humboldt County. It's almost impossible not to talk about voter suppression and voting without talking about Stacey Abrams right now. Just the work that she's been doing in Georgia for the last 10 years, and this slow, steady progress of voting, and then where we're at today.
We are all ready.
You're all ready. Okay, I'm going to stop my video and I'm going to mute my.
It's hard to get it exactly queued up to where you wanted it, but it's pretty close.
And Stacey is really at the center of these battles. And so I think she's a fascinating person to talk to anytime, as you know, Jamila, because you've talked to her a lot as well. But I think she's a particularly fascinating person to talk to at this moment in American history.
Here's Ari Berman in conversation with Stacey Abrams.
Does the attack on voting rights at the state level make the passage of H.R. 1, the For the People Act, and H.R. 4, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, more urgent?
Demography is creating an existential crisis. Well, Republicans unchecked are creating an existential crisis for democracy. We have to ensure that Republicans cannot deny eligible voters their ability to engage in democracy. They're doing so by rolling back the clock on voting rights. And the only way to head that off is to invoke the Elections Clause of the Constitution, which allows the Congress and the Congress alone to set the time, place, and manner of elections at a federal level. And H.R. 1 is the start. It's the reform we need that will provide protection, provide a foundational level of access regardless of your geography. And we have to pass H.R. 4, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which will be the protection that once we have the standard, we then have to have the oversight and protection to make certain we don't watch it be butchered or eviscerated as it has been in the last 20 years.
Should we abolish the filibuster to pass these bills?
I do not support the filibuster. I understand the institutionalists who are concerned about minority rule. I would argue, though, that what is being done to voting rights is the antithesis of an attempt to support minority rule. And Republicans should be able to have it both ways. They can't continue to attack Democrats for calling for the end of the filibuster by saying we're not respecting existing rules that are meant to empower the minority, while they're still trying to snatch power away from elections officials and from voters in Georgia and Arizona and Michigan and Iowa. And so what I would say, though, is as someone who has been in one of these bodies, that we have to understand that, yes, it is a racist procedural rule that is grounded in this notion that the minority must be protected unless we disagree with what the minority needs out in within our nation. I believe that we need to offer a narrowly tailored version of a filibuster that is grounded in the constitutional principle that there are certain responsibilities that only Congress can meet. And I think that's the underpinning for existing exceptions. The judicial appointment exception, the cabinet appointment exception, the budget reconciliation exception are all grounded in this idea that these are constitutionally prescribed responsibilities that should not be thwarted by minority imposition. And we should add to it the right to protect democracy. It is a foundational principle in our country, and it is an explicit role and responsibility accorded only to Congress in the Elections Clause in the Constitution.
How did you feel?
Wow. So out of the mouths of Stacey what to do with the filibuster and the vote. one thing that we spent a lot of time talking about was what voting meant for us, and how we as women within the United States were reflected in voting and in the voting process. And so one of the ways that we write our pieces is by doing writing prompts. So we take some time, we have a little prompt, and we write that down. So what we're going to do is we're going to have some people read their writing prompts, and we're going to start with Andrea. She's going to come out and read her writing prompt. Our prompt was "My family votes from childhood to adulthood," and that was the prompt. And from there, as a writer and as an artist, you can go anywhere. It was like, this was like opening the door that then we were all encouraged to move through it, and whatever it came to us. So I'm going to turn my video and my sound off, and Andrea, you're going to be pinned to the muted myself. You can read your prompt of "My family votes from childhood to adulthood." Andrea.
Okay, hi. So I'm going to read my prompt. Coming from a poor, Black, and single parent household didn't really afford my family much time to think of doing anything other than meet our immediate survival needs. It wasn't until my mother married a naval officer that we had any investment in our government and politics. With the newfound security of their marriage, I was able to attend a better school, which was on a military base, and the curriculum was much more government and historically centered. Most of my education and involvement in politics began in high school. So to this day, there are still major obstacles to my political involvement, the biggest being my emotional capacity to navigate a system of oppression while being affected by it. So that was just my short response to that. And I could actually pause my video and read Olivia's response if you want. She actually texted it to me, if you want, Jackie. She's the other Black woman that's working with me on the project.
That sounds great.
Okay, so you won't be able to see me for a second, but you should be able to hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so this is short, but she said, my family votes, at least those who are US citizens. I have been voting since Obama when I was a college student. This term, I voted for myself and for the first time. And now I'm on the city council for Blue Lake. So that's a fun one. But anyway, yeah, thank you for listening.
So let's move along to let's hear Laura is going to do hers. I'm going to step aside so Laura can step in my seat.
So like Jackie said, the prompt was a beginning. It was a door for us to start to loosen our memories up and start to flow with whatever was inside from personal experience and memory. So the prompt was from childhood to adulthood. This, I'm gonna read you an excerpt of my response to the prompt, and I will stay in childhood, so I'm not growing. I'm not growing up in my prompt. I was 9 when Franco the dictator died. About 40 years had passed since he took the government after the Civil War from 1936 to 39. For the first time in a couple of generations, citizens could exercise their right to vote and choose their leaders. It was a living lesson on what had been taken away from Spanish citizens. All of a sudden, the Communist Party, the Socialists, and many other parties which had been organizing underground made their colorful presence known to us all. In a few days, our world went from black and white to technicolor. The different languages that had been forbidden and suppressed for so many decades were spoken out in the open. Songs of joy and sorrow and social discontent and nudity and bad language, the world exploded. I didn't notice a difference between my dad's and mom's excitement on the right and responsibility to choose the new government and a path forward. At home, my dad always had the last word. Outside the home, there were no women visibly making decisions in the public sphere. I sense excitement about women voting. Could it challenge the status quo? My sensation wasn't framed within words like these. It was just a feeling as I was a girl. And we may not use this at all. It is a way for me to start embodying where I came from and how that has been expressing both consciously and unconsciously in me. And like I said earlier, I would love to, when I hear more stories, to find what are the common gestures that could describe similar experiences, or even if they are very dissimilar, what is the commonality or the disparity? And perhaps, Paloma, would you like to read your response to the prompt?
Yes, I would love to. Just like Laura's, mine also is only about childhood. And it's a little bit, yeah, well, you'll see. Okay. Could you call choosing where or what to eat for dinner voting? Could you call deciding to read in the kitchen instead of the living room voting? Oh, wait, how about this? Deciding whether or not you should wear a t-shirt with a skirt or a t-shirt with some jeans for school tomorrow the next day. I'm like 99% confident I voted when I told my first grade teacher I was sick when I wasn't, and that I wanted to go home when I didn't. Really, all I wanted to do was go get ice cream with my mom. When I was 6, I was as much of a liar as I was a voter. Or maybe I was just a liar. Oh, actually, wait, I figured it out. Oh yeah, I know exactly when I first voted. In case you're out of the loop, or have not raised a small child who likes to watch Saturday morning cartoons on Nickelodeon, you should know that Nickelodeon, that kids channel that airs SpongeBob, is kind of genius. When Barack Obama won the election in 2008, I genuinely thought I had contributed to his win. I saw him on stage with his daughters, who are around my age, and I thought, yeah, me and like thousands of others 6 to 10-year-olds are the reason you're up there, dude. You better appreciate us for what we just did, just so you know. Because Nickelodeon, the absolute big brain geniuses they are, let us vote. They let a bunch of little kids decide who should be president. Now, I will say I had no basis for why I chose Barack Obama, and neither did the majority of us, except for the kids who were probably told what to choose by their parents. But that's not really what matters. What matters is that we felt like we were doing something, because adults have this way of making kids feel less than. Oh, the specifics I could get into. Do you know how many times the woman who works in the finance department at my office chose to talk to me over my supervisor over paycheck issues that she had? So she can feel better about making a mistake because I'm 18 and easy to yell at because, hey, what do I know about the rules of the workplace and whether or not I have any actual say in how I'm treated? But my supervisor, who is 48 and is used to arguing with employees who think too highly of themselves, scares her. But yeah, this one time I was 6 and I still wore shirts that occasionally had ruffles on the sleeve, and I felt included. And maybe it was just a way into indoctrinating children into supporting a two-party system, or maybe it was a way to make everyone in the US feel like they could change things for once. Who knows?
That was awesome, Paloma. That's the first we've heard of it. When we did our prompt and sort of read with each other, Paloma was not feeling well that day. So thank you so much for that, Paloma. The power of the media is very powerful, and the power of us to make decisions. We're going to move through now to a little piece that I wrote. Some of my ability to actually get my hands on concrete history and research is great. I mean, it's much greater for me to find out the history of a white woman in Fortuna than a woman of color in Eureka, even in the 50s or the 40s or the 60s. So my access to research, there is a fair bit of research. You know, it distills when you look at only women in history too. You kind of cut out a big swatch of research of what was recorded in the media. But at this particular era in Humboldt County, there was a very vibrant movement with the Fortuna Women's Club, Women's Civic Club in Fortuna in 1911. And I must say that a lot of my research and a lot of the work that I've done, Edie Butler has been essential in helping me figure out how to research and how to do things. And also looking at the Humboldt, oh, I'm just like having a huge brain fart. The Humboldt, help me out, Historical Society. Blah, 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 blah. The Humboldt Historical Society, going in there and looking at researches, all the archives there. And also Alex Stillman, and going into the house in Arcata, which my brain is not quite being able to pull up.
Phillips,
yes, thank you. Going in there and doing research for Women of the Northwest, we actually came across a lot of historical women. So if you're not a member of a historical society here in Humboldt County, please take the time to join and become a member and support those organizations, because our history is really essential for our future. It's not just looking at history as a quaint piece of, you know, information, but it's really looking at history on how we plan our future and how we live where we are today. So go and join all these people in there. We have some amazing historians. I'm going to ask Laura really quickly to find my charger for my computer that is in my backpack, because I seem to only have 32%, which will not get us through everything. Technology, you know, there's so much planning in technology. So we're going to move on to the piece that I wrote, and I've asked Sienna Nelson to join us, as well as Tammy Ray Scott. Sienna will be playing Louise. Tammy will be playing the narrator. There are pieces written in that are little stage directions that I will read out. Please feel free to do them as you hear the piece go by. Imagine that there are women sitting in a hall having a meeting of the Fortuna Women's Civic Club. So here we go. Sienna, take it away. You can go over here.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fortuna Women's Civic Club. For our new members here today, and there seem to be many, my name is Louise Werner. I am the current president of the club, and this is my son, Freddie. Some say he is the club mascot, and I must say he is certainly central in our home. We have quite a few things on the agenda this morning, so let's get started. If you will all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to my flag and the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Pledge of Allegiance was written by Captain George Thatcher Balch after the Civil War, and was later revised by a Christian socialist, minister, and patriot, Francis Bellamy. It was formally adopted by Congress 50 years later. The words "under God" did not enter the pledge until 1954.
Sounds of chairs scraping, clinking glasses, forks, laughter.
First on the agenda, we want to reach out to members not able to be with us today. Birdie White McNulty Hansen has ventured down to San Francisco to continue her good work with the State Federation of Women's Clubs. Perhaps one day she will represent our fine region by holding office with that venerable club. We wish her good speed and an easy return.
As reported in the Humboldt Beacon, Miss Henry A. Hansen, aka Birdie White McNulty Hansen, did not in fact become the first woman of this country to be honored with a district office. Did in fact, pardon me. become the first woman of this country to be honored with a district office when she became the treasurer.
A special thank you to Mrs. Lena Johnson for the beautiful rhododendrons. April is an olfactory and visual delight here because of these exquisite blossoms. Perhaps someday we shall all gather and parade through the towns glorifying this beautiful, fragrant flower. What a sight that will be.
Imagine a parade.
There are so many pressing local concerns. Let us get started. I invite Mrs. Mary Williams to take the lectern.
Thank you, Louise, and thank you to the Grandmothers Club for a delicious repast. I must be blunt and to the point. It has been brought to my attention, the letter penned by the chairman of the Democratic Congress, J.B. Sanford, this past week. I wish to read it in its entirety. It would be customary to settle into a comfortable position to receive an oration, but with this, I urge you to sit forward and summon all the strength and fortitude you can muster. Let me begin. As I said, it's prepared by J.B. Sanford, an argument against Senate Constitutional Amendment number 8. Suffrage is not a right. It is a privilege that may or may not be granted. Politics is no place for a woman. Consequently, the privilege should not be granted to her. The mother's influence is needed in the home. She can do little good by gadding the streets and neglecting her children. Let her teach her daughters that modesty, patience, and gentleness are the charms of a woman. Let her teach her sons that an honest conscience is every man's first political law, that no splendor can rob him, nor no force justify the surrender of the simplest right of a free and independent citizen. The mothers of this country can shape the destinies of this nation by keeping in their places and attending to those duties that God Almighty intended for them. The kindly, gentle influence of the mother in the home and the dignified influence of the teacher in the school will far outweigh all the influence of all the mannish female politicians on earth. The courageous, chivalrous, and manly men, and the womanly woman, the real mothers and home builders of the country, are opposed to this innovation in American political life. There was a bill, the Sanford Bill, before the last legislature, which proposed to leave this equal suffrage question to women to decide before men should vote on it. This bill was defeated by the suffragettes because they knew that the women would vote down the amendment by a vote of 10-1. Ugh. The men are able to run the government and take care of women. Do women have to vote in order to receive the protection of man? Why, men have gone to war, endured every privation and death itself in defense of woman. To man, woman is the dearest creature on earth, and there is no extreme to which he would not go for his mother or sister. By keeping woman in her exalted position, man can be induced to do more for her than he could by having her mix up in affairs that will cause him to lose respect and regard for her. Woman does not have to vote to secure her rights. Man will go to any extreme to protect and elevate her now. As long as woman is woman and keeps her place, she will get more protection and more consideration than man gets. When she abdicates her throne, she throws down the scepter of her power and loses her influence. Women's suffrage has been proven a failure in states that have tried it. It is wrong. California should profit by the mistakes of other states. Not one reform has equal suffrage effected. On the contrary, statistics go to show that in most equal suffrage states, Colorado particularly, that divorces have greatly increased since the adoption of the equal suffrage amendment, showing that it has been a home destroyer. Crime has also increased due to the lack of the mothers in the home. Woman is woman. She cannot unsex herself or change her sphere. Let her be content with her lot and perform those high duties intended for her by the great Creator, and she will accomplish far more in governmental affairs than she can ever accomplish by mixing up in the dirty pool of politics. Keep the home pure, and all will be well with the Republic. Let not the sanctity of the home be invaded by every little politician that may be running up and down the highway for office. Let the manly men and the womanly women defeat this amendment and keep woman where she belongs, in order that she may retain the respect of all mankind. J.B. Sanford, Senator, 4th District. I can hardly express my distress and rage at Mr. J.B. Sanford and his allegations. This is not a threat from far-flung New York, but right here in our 4th District. These seeds are being sown in Ukiah, and they must be overturned. One cannot ever be too small to be mighty, and that is what the women of Fortuna will be. We shall be the David to the Goliath of Mr. Sanford. 100 years from now, women throughout this great state will be celebrating our courage. The daughters of our daughters will walk into the voting booth with their head held high, standing on the shoulders of us here today. The Fortuna Women's Club, and indeed rural counties throughout the state, will be hailed as the votes that turn the tide towards suffrage. Yes. Thank you. This October, my dear friends, it is my conviction that we will register to cast our votes, and that come election day, our voices will be heard. October 1911. Thank you for your time and your continued diligence. And now Tammy's going to read a piece from the Humboldt Beacon newspaper that was happened on October 6th.
Entitled, Give the Woman a Square Deal. In Australia, New Zealand, Tasmania, Isle of Man, Norway, and Finland, women have full suffrage. In 28 states, women vote for local and school officers. In Wyoming, Colorado, Idaho, Utah, and Washington, women vote for the President of the United States and for all state officers. Why not California? 60,000 working women of California need the ballot for their protection. All of the women of California should vote. It is not fair that they should remain subject citizens without a vote. It is not fair that they should be compelled to obey laws concerning the making of which they have nothing it say. It is not fair that they should be compelled to pay taxes to support a government that continues to ignore their right to be as fully and as directly represented as their brother taxpayers. It is not fair that they should be held responsible for the home and their children and not be able to properly protect them.
So that was a statement that Gustavus Jasper, editor of the Humboldt Beacon newspaper, printed 6 days before the election. The Fortuna women went on to they were allowed to register to vote, and they voted on Fortuna sewage was their first big rallying cry, which is interesting because Fortuna's coming around to sewage questions again. So that's just a sample of what some of the things that we're looking at in combining this piece. We have 10 minutes left, and we're going to get Sienna Nelson to sing a song. Sienna and I were having a conversation about the ERA, and she wrote this song. Full disclosure, there is some swearing in this song. And so this video, maybe we can highlight Sienna in this video, just so all the women know if we mute ourselves, we can sing along, but let's not sing along with our sound on with Sienna.
Oh, really? I would love the chorus.
We won't hear you if we sing.
Oh, okay.
Zoom does that, but we're singing with you.
Yeah, Jackie and I were talking about the Equal Rights Amendment. Full disclosure, I had no idea that it wasn't actually an amendment. It has not been ratified by all the states. It was first passed by Congress in 1923, and it's still not an amendment. It was intended to provide equal rights in matters of divorce, property, employment, and other matters. And I just think that that is crazy. So I wrote a very simple song about it. I did some research on Wikipedia and was able to discover that it's has a very long history. It's come up to be ratified several times, and it still has not been ratified. So here's my song. The Equal Rights Amendment, also known as the ERA, seeks to end legal distinctions between men and women of the USA. First introduced to Congress in 1923, it's been nearly 100 years and still we've yet to see it passed as an amendment. It's not been ratified by enough states to make it law, and so it gets denied. What the fuck? What the fuck? It's 2021. It's far past time. We must stand up. We must get this shit done. Everyone, what the fuck? What the fuck? It's 2021. It's far past time. We must stand up. We must get this shit done. We've put a man on the moon. Still we drag our feet. When it comes to equal rights for women, our country's obsolete. We've seen pussy-grabbing presidents and still no equal pay for our hard-working women. When will come the day? What the fuck? What the fuck? It's 2021. It's far past time. We must stand up. We must get this shit done. Last time, what the fuck? What the fuck? It's 2021. It's far past time. We must stand up. We must get this shit done.
Yay! So we're gonna burst forth in song, and we're looking for people who have stories of their families or places that they could point us locally. Like Laura and Andrea said, we're looking at not only the history that I talked about in my little piece, but later in history. So what happened in Humboldt County in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010, 2020. So that we're looking at sort of that history as well. And just to really get some local stories that maybe aren't published, stories that are vernacular in your family that you know about, your grandmother voting or your mother voting or you running for office, and to put those in the show as well. We talked a little bit about some of the challenges that women who are holding office and running for office, some of the challenges that they had with really vitriolic attacks on them as persons, and what that was when those women came together. I'm speaking in Eureka for Eureka City Council, and they came together and stood as a group and said, this needs to stop, and what that is, even as a woman holding office and moving forward through the voting process. So any comments or questions or great ideas that anybody has, please feel free to either drop your email in the chat and Edie will reach out to you, or you can email me directly, JackieD@arcadaplayhouse.org. That's JACKIED @arcadaplayhouse.org, or you can just do the info button on the Arcada Playhouse website. Because we really are trying to mine information that has not necessarily been documented and recorded. Oh, look, there's my email in the chat. On the panel, our panel, does anybody have anything else to add before we push forth for the last 3 minutes?
I do.
Yes, go Tammy.
Just after what you were saying, during the pandemic, everything is closed. Historical Society, the libraries, all these places where we go and get our research. So we really need these stories and ephemera from you, the community in Humboldt County and kind of beyond, you know, a little bit in rural counties as well. Any stories, pictures is really important, especially because we can't get into these facilities where we normally get our work done.
Mm-hmm. It's true. And also to piggyback on that, that some of the stories we're looking for as well might not be included in those venues. So both and Tammy Ray Scott. Yeah. So we have a comment in the chat that says, Phyllis, Brenda Starr said, what the fuck? WTF, WTF, lived through it and thanks to Phyllis Shifley. And Brenda Starr also says, thank you so much for presenting to our community your workshop processes. I'm always appreciative of your local, inclusive, fierce love. So that's the team that's been working on historical things for quite some time. Yeah, so we have 4 minutes left. Any other comments from anybody else?
Can I say,
Laura?
how about, Paloma, how about your poem?
Oh, I just combined my poem and the prompt response into one.
Okay, got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay, full disclosure, I put a little piece of Obento chicken katsu in my mouth. It was so good. I couldn't resist. It's the last lunchbox of our lunchbox series, which was so great. It was really great to have all these great foods delivered to us.
I have a quick thing, if I could, about Humboldt County
Yeah.
and the vote. And this is really quick. It's from the Humboldt historian. Despite all efforts, a November 1896 vote to add suffrage for all as a constitutional amendment failed in California. Of all the votes cast, there was heavily voted against it was San Francisco and Alameda counties voting against the amendment. And Humboldt County voters were in favor of women having the right to vote. And the men voted 2,762 voted for the amendment, while 2,056 voted against it. The call for women's suffrage in California once again went to the voters in 1911. And on that year, the measure was soundly defeated in San Francisco Bay Area and just barely passed in Los Angeles. Suffragists were already beginning to plan for another campaign when late reports from the far-flung counties, us, began to swing the vote in their favor. And when the count was finally completed a few days later, equal suffrage passed by just 3,587 votes. With rural districts ultimately driving the amendment to victory. On October 13th, the Humboldt Standard said, Humboldt County was among the leaders in this vote, with the vote in the county almost 2-1 in favor of women's suffrage. And the California campaign helped reignite state campaigns across the nation and set a new standard for public outreach, systematic organizing, and innovative approaches. So, what happens here counts, and what happens in rural communities counts.
And I think it's a testimony to the resilience and tenacity of women, and that this movement lasted for 74 years before women actually got the vote. So it wasn't a fly-by-night thing. And so I think we're seeing some of that come around the horn now with how we, women of color are so resilient and so able to keep moving forward, and how we support that, and how we look to supporting the vote and away from voter suppression, and a way to find a system where everyone's vote does count, because that is I dream a world where everyone's vote counts. So that is the end of our Dancing with the Ballot. So please check in back with us, sign up on the arcadaplayhouse.org. Thank you to Tammy Ray Scott, Sienna Nelson, Paloma Tejeda, Andrea Stuckey, Edie Butler, and Laura Munoz here on the other side of the couch. Woo!
There's still work to be done, so let's get to it.
Yes, exactly. Let's get to it. Coming up next, we have Laura Woods is going to be